Hello, everyone. My name is Julie McVey, and this is Unordinary Made Ordinary, where we talk about extraordinary experiences of everyday people. After today's interview, if you would like to continue the conversation of all things metaphysical, paranormal, supernatural, feel free to join our private UMO group by clicking on the link in the video description. And today, our guest is Ginette Biro.
Awesome.
Welcome.
Thank you
Pretty
for
good with
having
me.
me. I know you did a great job with my name. I'm impressed.
Ginette is beautiful.
Thank you.
um, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for
I,
having me.
I appreciate you doing this. So we have a lot to cover. So let's get right into it. Would you please just give us a little bit of background on who you are?
Yeah, for
Okay.
sure. So I am, the way most people know me now is as a medium and a channeler. But the core of me, the very human, normal version of me, is I'm a mom. I have two rambunctious kids that just keep me on my toes. A husband who is extremely understanding of having a partner who is deeply connected into other worlds and realms and so on. I grew up as a really sporty kid, dance, figure skating, all kinds of team sports, very linear, logical, science-minded, like to understand stuff. At the same time, I always had this innate curiosity of what else is there, right? Are those deeper why questions like, why does the planet float in space? And what's beyond the planet? And what's beyond this? And what are ghosts? What are this? And so I've always been a really inquisitive kid. And so I went to university, I got my kinesiology degree. I worked with people in acute stage rehab. At the same time, I was a country music singer. And so I was doing some tours. I got to sing for the Canadian Forces in Afghanistan and Dubai and so on, all while my mediumship was just bubbling over and I didn't really understand it. So retrospectively, I mean, I could go back to the age of 5 and remember some unique mediumistic experiences, but I didn't really start to embrace it until 20. And it's been a journey since then of uncovering stuff. And so I was a practicing medium already for over a decade before I had a near-death experience, which then took my understandings of the afterlife to a next level in understanding how they work, which gave me greater purpose in being back here, which ultimately led me to this moment with you today. So that's
Wow,
me.
what a life. It sounds so full and continuing to be so.
Yeah.
I like to ask my guests, did you grow up religious as a child or spiritual practices in the home, anything like that?
So we were raised loosely Catholic. So I did like confirmation and first communion and all of that. But so that was from my dad's influence. My mom's was Ukrainian Orthodox. Both of them had a religious belief, a belief in something more. Neither was strictly stuck to either religion, but they was brought in. They always said, we're giving you this as a foundation for you to then make your choices with. And I connected with some pieces very much so, but there was many things that I did not connect with. Again, my questions of why this? Why this? For example, why do I need to go to a priest to talk to God? Why can't I just talk to God? Right. So
Yes.
growing up, I would always be wondering those questions and those limitations that I found within religion that I didn't quite feel I fit. And so that's why I say loosely, we were never forced into following any one thing. And I really just kind of branched out of that probably, I think by, age 14, 15 was just like, I don't think that is my box that I fit in.
Yeah.
And that really was me opening up to so much more of, what box do I fit in? And then realizing, what, there's actually no box for anyone. It's just what am I drawn to? And that will lead me on my path.
Wow, that's pretty amazing for such a young age to start getting this for yourself. That's amazing.
Yeah.
You did mention that about 5, you started having some experiences. Could you share just a little bit about that?
Yeah. So retrospectively, I can kind of go back to like the root of when my gifts started to open, but at the time I didn't know what was happening. So I remember at the age of 5 is when I really started knowing there were people in my room at nighttime. And by people, I mean spirits, beings, a presence.
Oh,
I
okay.
knew it and I couldn't see them yet at that time, but I could feel them as viscerally as anyone can feel when they're sitting next to other people in a room, right? Like you
Okay.
can close your eyes and you know there are people in the room.
Mm,
And so I remember going to bed at nighttime was really scary for me because I would get in bed, everything would be fine. And as soon as it got quiet,
mm-hmm,
it's like my energy
mm-hmm,
would expand as I
mm-hmm,
understand it now. And I would feel them energetically appear. And that
mm-hmm.
was terrifying for me because I didn't grow up in a family of mediums, right? And I asked that question for years. I'm like, why didn't I have that
Yeah.
wise grandmother or,
Yes.
that uncle or the auntie or someone who was like, don't worry, I know what this is, right?
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
didn't have that. And so there was a lot of questioning through my childhood and my youth, my own sanity, because to me, whatever I was
Oh,
experiencing was so real,
huh.
but I couldn't prove it. And although my parents, they were as supportive as they could be, but they didn't know what else to say. It was just, Ginette, you have a really active imagination, I guess, and just go to
Mm,
bed.
mm-hmm.
And so it wasn't until later in years that I understood that those beings that I felt were my counsel, my spirit guides who would come
Ah,
in and be near me. But my human conditioning at the time was to fear it because, movies were really good at being very scary to me when I was
yes.
little. And so it's just quick, quick, quick. I would receive the feeling, turn it into a scary movie thing, and then think there was things under my bed or something bad was going to happen, or I didn't understand energy. So that was me
Wow.
at 5.
What about siblings? Did they have any of these kinds of experiences or
Uh,
feelings?
I have an older brother, and he's fairly intuitive, but he's not. He doesn't practice it. He
Mm-hmm.
like he's like I said, he's fairly in touch, but he never went down that road
Mm-hmm.
to explore it more, or anything like that. So he was always very supportive of me growing up, though. Like he was my real safe space at nighttime, even up until the age of 15.
Mm.
He would never, ever judge me if he would wake up in the morning and I was sleeping on the floor of his room.
Oh,
Because I would
yeah.
often do that if I just could not handle being by myself. I could always, there was safe space to just grab my pillow and blanket and sneak on the floor and sleep there. And he
Yeah.
never, ever judged me, even as, he was 3 years older. So here's this 18-year-old guy, his
Oh, yeah.
15-year-old sister is on the floor again. And he'd just be like,
Wow.
morning.
Oh,
So he
that's
was just
nice.
like, without saying much or doing much, he was always a safe space, which I'm so grateful for.
Wow. So, okay. So about 20, you started to put the pieces together somehow.
Yeah. So it was actually around 15 years old after my grandmother passed away that we had not discussed anything before she passed that she would visit me or anything like that. Her and I were always very close in life, but we never talked about mediumship. I didn't know to talk about mediumship at that time. But after she died, I had this instant knowing that she would visit me. I just
Hmm.
knew. And I was terrified, like tears, terrified to see a ghost, even though it was my grandmother, and I
Oh.
knew it was going to happen. And so I spent probably the first 2 weeks after she passed at nighttime just repeating this mantra with covers over my head saying, please don't scare me, please don't scare me, please don't scare me, until I'd fall asleep.
Mm-hmm.
Because my greatest fear, which is interesting, was
Mm-hmm.
to see a ghost. And now I'm a medium,
Yeah, that's
right? Like
very
it's funny,
well.
but anyway, so for 2 weeks, I, would just repeat that. And I finally started to settle after about 2 weeks. And then I had this very, very vivid nighttime visitation from her in a dream state. And she
Okay.
walked into my room in her blue slacks and her white blouse that she would always have on. And I remember I sat up and I said, oh my gosh, you figured out how to do this without terrifying me. And she said, absolutely. I have no intent to scare you, but I want you to know I'm okay.
Mm.
And so
Wow.
that was my first like visual connection with spirit was at the age of 15. Before that, it was always just kind of feeling them. Then by 17, I was starting to hear spirits. And that was very confusing for me because, again, I started to question my sanity. And I was like, am I
Oh,
making
right.
this up? Am
Mm-hmm.
I experiencing mental illness? Am I, and again,
Mm.
not having that wise family member or confidant to go to say, hey, you're probably hearing spirit and here's how to do it. I just whirled around thinking I was just losing it. And so what I realized was that experience into hearing spirit and falling into massive anxiety actually gave me the tools to learn how to move through my own mind and really come to, I guess I could say, control my own mind and my thoughts. Are these thoughts benefiting me? Are they not? And I
Oh.
did this program to deal with your anxiety, right?
Mm.
And that gave me my foundation to deal with everything that would come. So that moment of feeling like I was losing it was actually my greatest switch point, which then opened me up at the age of 20 to finally meet my spirit guide in real time
Wow.
and have them tell me like, okay, no more running away now. Now you're going to learn this and you're going to
Okay.
deal with this.
Oh, gosh. Okay, so they started talking to you here and there to kind of warm you up to the idea. And then what kinds of things would they be sharing with you?
So it was like I would get sometimes, okay, so when we hear spirit, sometimes I can hear, and when I say spirit, it's an umbrella term for anyone on the other side, whether it's family members, friends, guides, angels, right? I just call it spirit. But sometimes they come in like your own voice in your head, but it's not your thought. Other times they'll come in like a separate voice, male, female, higher, lower, in your head, obviously not yours. Other
Okay.
times you can hear them audibly outside of your head, right? Like a floating voice,
Mm.
disembodied voice.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be snippets of those three different ways that would randomly come to me. And so a disembodied voice was terrifying because you're looking around at where is that
Who
coming
said that?
from? Yeah. Another voice in my head was terrifying because I was like, did I hear that or did I make that up?
Right.
And then the one that wasn't a voice per se, but it was just a thought that came in, I questioned, was that mine or did I make that up?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. So that's why that was quite unnerving. Um, but when my guide came to me and finally showed me who he was at the age of 20, the real significant piece was that my cat at the time saw him also. And so when I heard his voice say, Ginette, look down the hall, and I
Uh-huh.
was home by myself, I looked down the hall and I saw him at the end of my hall. My cat, who was live, was looking up at him right at his feet, staring at him with her tail wagging like they do when they see something they're watching, right? And it was just this pivotal moment in my journey of like, okay, this has all been real, right? All of these things have been real. And
Mm.
I'm going to dive in and learn about it instead of running from it and fearing it. And that really was where I took off instead of trying to fight
Oh
something
my
that was naturally
goodness.
coming
Did
out.
you have friends at least to start talking to about these things
I
or
did have a
no?
few after in when I was trying to figure it out, like 15 to 17, I didn't talk about it.
Oh
I would mention
gosh.
it to my parents once or twice, but again, they didn't know
Yeah.
what to do. So it was just like, Jeanette, you got to get a hold of yourself.
Yeah, and no internet, right?
And no
Nothing, no.
internet.
How do you
Yeah.
find out? How scary and alone that
Yeah.
must have been. When
Yeah.
you first saw your guide, did you recognize this as someone from your life now that had passed on, or like an ET or an angel? What did this guide look like?
So this one, he's one of my most prominent guides. He is very human looking. He was human in a past life. He's not been present in this life as a human. He's been my guide from birth. He shows himself, though, he's got short, dark hair like mine, a little bit darker skin, but he wears military fatigues. So he's got combat pants with a beige colored or khaki colored t-shirt and his combat boots. That's how he shows himself all the time. And he's probably about 35-ish.
You did not know him in this life, but he has had a human life.
Yeah.
Did he say why he took interest in help being your guide? Did we get that information?
It was just part of our agreement before we came in that he would be my
Okay.
lifetime guide to, step forward. Um, and I mean, I can hear him right now. He's like, you needed the stern authority is what he's saying. He's like, you needed the stern authority to get your attention at the time, to listen to him. So he's quite funny, very loving, and just, he's been great.
So you're still in contact with this guide, and you have others who have stepped forward as well over time as the years progress. Do you want to share it a little bit more about the progression? How old were you for the NDE?
The NDE was actually in 2019. So that was only not that long ago.
Would you mind maybe just sharing a little bit of how you progressed as a medium before we talk about the NDE? Okay.
For sure. Yeah. So after that meeting with my guide, his name was Andre. So after I met Andre face to face and he was like, "Okay, you need to stop running," I dove into, so that was around 20. I dove into learning everything I could about ghosts, spirits. I kind of just like unraveled it, right? So at first it was ghosts. Tell me all about ghosts, right? And then it was like spirits, and what are spirits? And then what is it about angels? And I had references, obviously, from being brought up, with that Catholic kind of energy background. And then that I started to kind of feel energies and stuff too. So I was like, hey, there's an energy world going on here as well. And then my empathic nature really came to the forefront, and I realized why I had anxiety for so many years. It was because I was feeling so many things and people, and then spirits around me. So it was kind of like an unraveling, or like peeling the layers of an onion to get down to the deeper layers. So for about probably 2 years, I just dove in and immersed myself in everything I could about these things, reading books and all of that. And then I started to get more insights after a while, and then more guides stepped forward. And I remember I had a couple years after that, maybe 4 years or so after that, I had these 3 guides step forward, and they were cloaked, right? And so they introduced themselves as these 3 monks, and I was like, oh, okay. And I was feeling more comfortable with what was happening. And I said to them, show me who you are. And they're like, no, you're not ready for that. And I was like, no, I'll be fine. Thinking like, I've read a lot of things, I'll be fine. And they're like, no, you're not ready to see who we are. We'd like to, have you start to trust us, and then we'll show you. So I spent a couple months, about 3 months, learning lots of things from them, and them sharing things that, that were able to then come to be true. And I started to create this bond of trust with what they were giving me. And then came the day where they took their cloaks off, and I realized that they didn't look like Andre. They looked different, less human-like. They were Pleiadian, right?
Okay.
You're familiar with Pleiadians?
A little bit, but please share for the listeners who may not. Probably most of them have heard of it, but please share.
And like, I understand when people bring out terms like this, and it's like, oh no, oh, okay, it's going that way, because that's what happened to me. So I remember I saw them. They Pleiadians come from the Pleiades star system, which I believe is 444 light years away. It's a cluster of stars that we can see, close to, I think, the Taurus constellation as a reference point.
Okay.
Anyways, these are higher ascended beings who have already gone through the ascension process that humanity is in right now, right? And so their job is to help humanity ascend in consciousness, and humans eventually will then help other places ascend in consciousness, right? So they're very human-like, but they're taller on average than we are. And they're a little bit more bluish tinged than we are. And so I remember when I mean, they kind of look like Avatar a little bit, but more human looking than Avatar. Okay, like the movie, like more human. Anyways, so I remember when they took their cloaks off and I saw them, I thought, great, thanks so much. This is where mediums go crazy, because this is where, now we're talking to aliens. Thanks so much. And I was like, I quit mediumship, because now it just went into what's in my mind was crazy, because my consciousness wasn't ready for that at that point. Even though when they were cloaked, I was like, no, I'll be fine. They're like, no, you won't. You need to trust who we are first. So I pushed them away for about a month or two. Because I was like, that's like, I was mad, to be honest. And they're like, we knew you would do this, and that's okay. We will be right here until you're ready. And sure enough, I let it settle for a bit, and my mind had some time to expand, which our minds have to do as we grow and ascend, right? We reach new concepts and we need time to adjust to it. And after a while, I invited them back, and they have continued to be these beautiful teachers of higher knowledge, higher understandings of consciousness and thought. And they bring in lots of message about love and love transmuting fear energies and conscious choice of how we want our lives to be and what higher dimensional consciousness is and all of that stuff. So they are just a few of the different kinds of guides I have. If we fast forward to, and then we'll come back to the NDE, but if we fast forward to COVID brought in yet another 3 guides, which are the 3 guides of light. And I've channeled them many times on my podcast, and they are not even embodied. They are simply light consciousness.
Oh, non-physical beings.
Non-physical. Yeah,
Gotcha.
they are just light. So there are so many different guides and sources of energy and information that we can access. So it's an ever-growing and expanding group of teachers.
Can I go back just a little bit when you were asking your first guide about ghosts and spirits?
Mm-hmm.
Can you share with us what is the difference?
I mean, I think everybody would have their own opinion on this. The way that I understand it, it's pretty much the same thing. Some people will say a ghost is a spirit that is earthbound and is stuck.
Okay, right.
So we could quantify it as that. But that essentially is a spirit.
Gotcha.
Right.
Okay.
So it's kind of one and the same thing. It just depends on how you wish to see it. Spirits also can show up as a ghost. They can show up, say, just the torso up suddenly appears in your field of view, and we think, oh my gosh, a ghost. But really, it's a past loved one who's come back into this dimension and basically pushed an image into our lower frequency, which is a snapshot. And that's what we see, which is why it only lasts a second or two, but it's like a picture. And so we have learned over time to think of that as a ghost, when yet it's just a spirit trying to densify their frequency because they don't have a dense body anymore.
Okay.
Right.
And before you met the 3, or before they took their hood off,
yeah,
you had not researched and realized that you could possibly meet ET guides, or you just hadn't crossed that information?
Had vaguely heard of aliens and things, and it was in a realm of possibility, but not in my realm.
Gotcha.
It was like, I'll keep that on the shelf.
Yeah, it's sure. Not for me.
Yeah.
It kind of didn't go there.
Exactly. And at that time, I didn't think mediums dealt with light beings or aliens, right? I just had these clear lines or boxes, and that was not a part of my box. But what I realized is the spirit world doesn't have boxes. It's like higher frequency energy, which is not limited, right? So, yeah.
Do you know some of the reasons of why ghosts or spirits get stuck or here on the earth realm?
Yeah, so there's many reasons. Sometimes a spirit will purposely want to stay here, not stay, but be as close or as dense as possible. Sometimes because they really enjoyed it. And so they just simply want to be near. Oftentimes, though, a more common reason is they are really sad that their death happened. If it was a tragic death or something like that, they pop out of their body and they're like, oh my gosh, no. And they're not wanting to fully embrace the fact that they have died. Their physical body has ceased to exist. But they're hesitant and they're like, no, I'm not crossing over. So they kind of stay stuck. So that's another reason. And then sometimes they just enjoy visiting. And so we can have times where they're not staying more permanently, but they're just visiting. And the way in which we perceive or feel them just depends on how dense, or basically how much they can slow their frequency.
Okay.
Because if we think of frequencies that divide dimensions, right? Like we're in a 3D dimension. We all move around in third dimensional frequency. And in grade 8 science, we learned that all matter vibrates, right? Like I remember that day, and the teacher had his pencil. He's like, this is vibrating particles of matter, and so are you, and so is your chair, and so is your desk. So vibrating particles of matter vibrate in a range of frequency within third dimension. That's what makes our world real. As soon as you vibrate faster than third dimension, you move into fourth dimension.
Okay.
And so on in fifth dimension, and so on and so forth. So all it is spirit, when they cross over, if they land in fourth or fifth or whatever dimension, they have to, from that really high frequency, slow their frequency down enough to then be made visible in 3D.
Okay.
Which is what is challenging for some of them, which is why some communications happen better than others. Just depends. Yeah.
The spirits that get kind of stuck and they don't want to move on, do they not have guides that are trying to say, hey, you need to maybe think about moving on, or do they let them alone?
They definitely have guides. So anytime that I've seen souls being stuck, oftentimes their view is that they're kind of looking down, or they're looking kind of narrow-minded, like with blinders on. And they're not looking that around them they have guides, angels, family members, friends trying to bring them to cross fully. Because the key is to cross over fully. And once you're whole and complete, then you can come back and communicate with more ease, rather than when you don't fully cross and you're kind of in between. It's harder.
Okay. Wow.
So the idea is that nobody crosses alone. Nobody dies or transitions alone. There's always support in it. It's just a matter of if the spirit sees that or not. Yeah.
Okay, I do want to get into the NDE, and I still have a million other questions. I was wondering though, I had heard you also lucid dream and astral project. I was going to ask, when did that start happening, and did you know? Oh, I know what, knew what it was, or not?
The lucid dreaming probably started around my teens. However, if I rewind back to when I was 7, between the ages of 7 and 13 years old, I had a series of fevers where I would get sick once a year. And in that, I would get 2 rounds of fever episodes, usually like a day or 2 apart, from a really high temperature. I would go into this fevered state that doctors couldn't figure out what it was. I spent a week in the hospital in grade 2 with brain scans and everything. What would happen is my temperature would reach a certain level and I would go rigid, and I was in a completely different dimensional space. I didn't understand it at the time, but everything went black. I couldn't see anything. And I would basically move from the very atomic level of our beings and blast out into the cosmic level and then back.
Okay.
Which was terrifying as a kid. But what that did is that opened the doorway for me to astral travel or lucid dream with more ease later. It also brought in a lot of other info stuff. But so it kind of started in that series of fevers that I would apparently outgrow by the age of 13, which I did.
Wow. Okay. See, that's new info. I have not heard that before. Well, would you want to feel free to share any other information before we talk about the NDE, but are you ready to sort of walk us through that? And then we can talk about all kinds of things that you've learned. Okay.
Absolutely. So my NDE happened August 30th, 2019. And it's funny in a way that it happened. And I say funny because leading up to my NDE, and by that point, I had already been practicing medium for about a decade, right? I had talked to thousands of spirits by this point about the many different ways you cross and the many types of spirits, light beings, all these kinds of things. And not that I knew everything or would I ever assume I know it all. The more I learn, the more I realize I don't know. But I had a pretty good working understanding of mediumship and transition. But what I realized with my NDE is how vastly different it is to actually be on the other side versus observing the other side, which is what I did in all my astral travels, right? So a couple weeks leading up to my NDE, there was a series of events that I chronicle in my book that had me questioning what was going on and what was happening. And so in retrospect, I see how my guides were leading me up to this moment of my NDE. But in the lead up, I was still asking spirit, like, hey, who the heck is dying soon? Who is dying? Can you just tell me who is dying? And I was scanning my family members and friends, and I couldn't pinpoint it. And it wasn't until the day before, I believe it was the day before, a friend of mine phoned and said, I don't think you should have this surgery. I'm afraid you're going to go and not come back. And I was like, I remember hearing that and thinking it was the most comforting thing someone could have said to me, which is odd, right?
Yes.
But I was so comforted by the words, but I still didn't think I'm going to have an NDE. I just was like, oh, I'll have some sort of astral travel or insight, right? And so it was interesting that then the day leading up to the day of my surgery, I was weakened beyond measure to that point. The whole reason for my surgery was I was hemorrhaging really badly from my monthly cycle. And I had just had one more cycle right before my surgery. So I was just hemorrhaging, literally. And they had me on all the medication possible to stop it. Like nothing worked, which is why we're doing the surgery. And so even my mom, who was a nurse on a surgical ward the day before my surgery, was like, if I was a doctor, there is no way I would let you have this surgery the way that you are. And I remember being like, just let me do this. Right. And so as I got closer to the surgery moment, the hour, I was getting more excited, and I was so weak, but I was like excited. And when they were wheeling me into the OR, I was excited, like a kid waiting to go down a water slide, kind of excited.
Like you knew. But you knew something.
I knew something, but I didn't know what, right? And so then when they put the gas on me to knock me out, I remember that moment of like almost wanting to like high five the anesthesiologist and be like, see ya. Like it was really comical, right?
Wow.
So they knocked me out. And then I just landed on the other side, walking up on this grass onto this kind of hill. And I knew exactly where I was right away. And having never physically been there, you would think, how would I know? But I knew it was viscerally different. And it was the same as like mediumship is like if I was to tell you all about Egypt or France or something where you've never been, and I could tell you all about it. I could cook you the food. We could watch videos. We could listen to the music. We could do everything except go there. The moment you're actually there is so viscerally different. And so that's what mediumship was to me in the before versus the after. When I had my feet on the ground walking on the other side, I could, from where I was standing, see every blade of grass in absolute detail. If I wanted, I could just look
like
and
zoom in.
Yeah. It was just there. And the sky was like the most beautiful blue you could ever imagine. It was this beautiful, bright, yet deep blue. And I walk up to this kind of picnic barbecue kind of summer scene, and I would have thought my afterlife would have been a tropical island. That's what I would have assumed, right? But it was this beautiful summer picnic. And I remember it was my grandmother that in spirit who came to get me. And it was the best reunions of family members and friends that had passed. And then those I knew from past lifetimes. It was these hugs and these reunions and these conversations that just brought so much joy. It was like I knew people from lifetimes before. And when I met them, it was like, what have you been up to? What have you been doing now? And it like I spent what felt like hours reminiscing with so many different people.
So would you talk about your past life or what they've been doing on the afterlife? Or
all
both?
Of it. Yeah.
And these are past lives. I mean, I imagine you'd remember your family members from this life, but you remembered all the past life people like yesterday?
I knew who they were as much as I would know a friend I haven't seen in a year. Like that's what it felt like.
That's
and I remember
so weird. Yeah.
It was just all knowing, like you just, and the hugs that I had from them was like the most beautiful hugs. It felt like when little kids run at you and throw themselves in your arms, like, that feeling where you're so joyful, it was like that. And my whole experience on the other side in this timeline, in our human timeline, was about 20 minutes is how long I was under. But I felt like I spent hours there. And after what felt like hours with these reunions and all this, then my grandmother took me to this other place, which was this white room. And this room of the blueprints is what it was called. And it was at the very edges of the universe, where it's like the universe is creating itself. It was the edge, but not an end. It was like where it's creating itself. Anyways, so we're in this white room, and we're on this big white boardroom table, and my grandmother was there, but so was my whole council. And that council from when I was little, those guides that would come and see me in my room, they were all there. And on the table, they rolled out what looked like a blueprint. And I remembered kind of like almost laughing, being like, oh my gosh, it looks like a blueprint, like architect's blueprints. And it was my life path, my life blueprint for this lifetime.
Okay.
And I always in mediumship described it to people like a tapestry. I'm like, we have this tapestry of our life that's weaved. And so I was surprised that they rolled it out like a blueprint, but on this blueprint was this long line down the center horizontally, and it was still alive with this iridescent energy kind of running back and forth. And so I knew that I was still alive.
Okay.
But what we did is we went through a life review of everything up until that point.
Okay.
And when we got to that point, my guide said, this is where we're going to ask you, do you want to stay or do you want to go? And I was like, oh, well, I want to go back. But I didn't feel it in a sense of fear. It wasn't like, please let me back, or I must go back, or there was no bargaining. It just was completely my decision. And I didn't even have to ponder. It was just like, well, yeah, I want to go back. I have more I would like to do. But it wasn't like, please let me back, I need to do more. It just was so factual. It was like, well, no, I have more to do. And they're like, okay. And so they said, before you go back, then you have the opportunity with what's remaining of my life blueprint, which is about this long in my memory. But I don't know how long the time was before, because my guide is in the way blocking the full visual.
Okay.
So I don't know how long this reference is, right? But they said, with this part of your life, you can change some things before you go back. And I was like, really? And there was these different kind of, they almost looked like fuses in a fuse box along this iridescent line. And I could take them out and replace them with different destiny juncture points in my life based on where I'd gotten to.
Wow.
And so I remember at that point, I was like, wow, we really do create the blueprint of what we're doing here. And then it's our free will of being human that allows us to navigate what we created coming here in the first place. So I remember taking out different ones and changing them. The first one I took out, and they said, they're like, you will remember the first one, but you're not going to remember the details of the rest. And I was like, okay. And the first one was chronic health issues. I took out that plug of a karmic lesson, if we want to call it that. But I remember taking that out and being like, are you sure I can take this out? And they're like, yes. So I took it out and I replaced it. And I remember thinking like, there's no way this is possible. Like I was always one that was sick with something. I was always that canary in the coal mine person who like, if anyone's going to get it, Ginette's going to get it.
Yeah.
She'll be sick. We go on vacation. I get sick. Like there was always something. Right. And so that's why I was like, no way. Right. And I put it back in. And then did that with several others. And then they asked me again, they said, are you sure you want to go back? And the understanding was that my body was weakened so much that it would be a simple flip of a switch and I would have a heart attack and they wouldn't revive me on the table. It was that easy. And I was like, no, I want to go back. And they said, okay, so several things will happen in rapid succession then to get you on your path. I was like, okay. And then it was in that moment that I heard the nurse in recovery say, Ginette, are you awake? And this all happened within split seconds of each other. But she says, Ginette, are you awake? I feel my energy go like whoosh, back into my body. My grandmother's still standing there in spirit. And before I can even think, because I've had surgery before and I'm very groggy, like I'm a very sensitive to medication type person. So like children's Tylenol works great for me, right? So I'm not usually coherent after surgery. And so I
Okay.
felt myself go whamp, like whoomp back in my body.
Mhm.
And then my higher self came through really loud and clear and said to the nurse, I need you to write something down. Right. So, like, she just barely asked if I was awake. I didn't even open my eyes at this point. And I said to the nurse, I need you to write something down. And she stopped and she's like, okay, what do you need? I was like, I need you to write down these 4 phrases, these 4 things, so that I can remember them. It's very important. And then I need you to fold the paper up and put it in my hand.
Hmm.
And so she did. And I told her those things, which won't really make sense to anybody else, but they were key words for me.
Interesting.
And
Huh.
she folded it up, put it in my hand, and I held on to it. And then she went about her work and they gave me pain meds and stuff. And the key with that paper was that when I was not on pain meds, I would go and I would read that and I would remember everything that happened, because my higher self knew that if I was given all these pain meds, I would discount what happened. Because again, I'm very,
Oh,
I'm spiritual,
right.
I'm logical. I'm like, give me
Sure.
the facts, give me, like, like if there's medication, did I hallucinate? Did this and this and this,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so I gave that paper to my mom once I got in recovery, and they'd given me pain meds by then. And then it was a day or so later, when I had no other medication in my system, Spirit was like, go grab that paper. It's time. And so I remember I grabbed the paper and I looked at it, and it just whoosh, everything flooded back at me. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I sat and told my parents the whole story. And then I started writing my book, and
Oh
it
my
just
goodness.
came out. I have it here. I mean, for those that are looking, this was the paper. I framed it because it's so special, but it just says like Great Baba, which was my grandma, tree
Okay.
roots, time to entwine and went far. So these were like
And
pieces,
that just made it all come back to you like
these
those
words.
words for some reason. Whoa,
Yeah.
that's so cool.
Yeah. So and that was
Huh.
it. So it was really profound. And if ever there was, say, a 2 or 3% chance of doubting Spirit, even though I was already a medium and I trusted my gift,
Hmm.
there is no way anyone could convince me that this didn't happen. Right? Like it's so visceral to me. Even when I tell this
Yeah.
story, it just lights my whole being up.
Is it stronger than other memories that you've had in this life, would you say?
Yeah, it's so vivid. It's
Huh.
so vivid. Yeah, every time.
Wow, that's so interesting. And the blueprint still, I wonder about that. How you were like, well, I wonder why it's not a tapestry, maybe, but maybe it's your left brain analytical and that worked. They're like, oh, this would work really well for her. I don't know.
Could
I was
be.
just
Yeah.
wondering.
Yeah, could
And
totally
the
be.
council that you saw that was from your childhood, your 3 guys weren't there? The Palladians, Andre, is that his name? Your other
Yep.
one? They
Mhm.
they weren't there, or they were?
No, they were all a part of it. Like they
They were.
are a part of that council. There's about 12 of them in my council that have always kind of been around to
Okay.
help me move through this experience on the planet. And we all have a grouping of spirit guides or angels or whatever, helping us through. No one comes in without.
So cool. Can you
Yeah.
share with me, what do you think are some of the most powerful changes for you since the NDE?
Mhm. So since then, there's a couple different things. So um, I noticed my ability to tune in to higher frequencies is pretty instantaneous.
Mm,
Before, with mediumship, I would take about 10 minutes to like tune in before a session and get to that frequency. Because as a
okay.
medium, I have to raise my frequency to see what's going on around, right? Now it's pretty instant. It's just there, which also makes my daily life very busy
Hmm.
because it's there all the time. So it's a different energy signature is one of the things.
Okay.
Um, Another thing that, I mean, my outlook on purpose and why we're here in this lifetime is very simple now too. It's kind of like, I remember how much I valued the human existence in that moment when they were like, do you want to go back? I was like, well, gosh, Yeah, I've put in, 30, what was it, 37, 38 years, whatever, of my life, of
Yeah.
time in this existence. Like,
Mhm.
that's a big foundation. I want to go back. Like,
Mm.
I want to use
True.
that foundation. I don't want to throw that away. And so I really understand the value of a human life in that way and how we
Mm.
really should make the most of it. But what I found really interesting is after that, um, how much of an adjustment it took to settle into humanity again.
Oh, interesting.
Because the frequency on the other side is so different. And although I was so excited to be back, the density of being human
Uh-huh.
was challenging because I was like, this can be such a harsh place for people and for experiences and what we go into. And sure enough, we stepped right into the pandemic after that. We stepped
That's
into all of
true.
that, right?
Right.
And I remember being
Mm.
like, oh my gosh, this is a harsh place compared to the bliss and the peace that I felt over there. But what that taught me is how much we really do embody each and every one of us into a human experience to learn wisdom through doing and trying and experiencing things. That's how we gain wisdom. We can't just read it, we have to experience it somehow. And that's why souls choose to come into a human life.
Is there, do some need one experience and others need 100? Is there an end to the experiences our soul needs? And then it's like, I've exhausted the human experience and they move on?
I would imagine so.
Mm.
I don't know the finite rule on that. I have
Mm.
my own assumptions on it, but I think it is very much that. I think we come in as many times based on what we want to learn. And if a human life is going to benefit that, then we'll take that on.
Hmm.
I do know that the human existence versus, say, a Pleiadian existence,
Yeah.
the human existence is much denser
Okay.
and it's
Right.
more complicated with the emotions that we have because we're living in a third dimensional reality and
Okay.
consciousness versus, say, a Pleiadian is a fifth dimensional consciousness, which is a bit higher. It's a little bit more love based. It's a little bit
Hmm.
less selfish based.
So your Palladian council, the three, for example, as an example, you said they already went through ascension process. Not necessarily did they experience 3D Earth. I'm assuming, but maybe they experienced another 3D reality.
Yep.
So a soul doesn't necessarily have to experience Earth. I'm assuming they can experience another kind of 3D reality.
Yeah, I would imagine so. Yeah.
Huh.
And there's so many more. I mean, that's part of the other things that have opened up since my NDE is the understanding of the multifacetedness that we are. We're not just simply in this reality, which is mind bending for many people, right? Like it's like, what?
So you mean like multiple
Multiple
timelines?
realities,
Yeah,
timelines.
yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't get that at all, of
Yeah.
course.
Yeah. Yeah. So we are but a drop in a bucket in this existence, which is a bucket within an ocean of consciousness.
Hmm.
But that access to consciousness completely resides within that one drop in that bucket. So we have access to all of it, right? And
Wow.
again, it's mind bending. It's like,
It,
what?
it
But we're
is.
we're trying to understand that based on human third dimensional reality principles, but it's something that is not of a 3D reality, right? So a lot of, since coming back from my NDE, is kind of having a foot in a couple different realities
Mm.
and being okay with that. And at
Mhm.
first that was kind of hard because I'm like, wait, how that doesn't fit? And it's like, it doesn't have to fit.
What is your purpose now, would you say?
Um, One of my greatest messages coming back was the absolute gift of conscious choice in being human. So human reality, from the view of spirit, is that they honor free will so very much. Our free will as human beings to decide if we're going to turn left or right, be good or bad, be kind or hurtful, grow or repeat cycles is completely up to us.
Mm.
And the more conscious we are about those choices we're making,
Mhm.
really dictates how we maneuver our blueprint, whether we totally deviate or whether we stay more aligned.
Hmm.
When we hit those different juncture points of desired experiences, we can really choose if we want to consciously move through it or completely avoid it. And so that when we realize that, we can see how that's one of the greatest gifts of being human is that free will conscious choice, that like everything that's happening to you, you have an opportunity in it to choose how you're going to respond. And that's a huge thing. But we just bypass that often because we're so busy. Yeah.
Wow, this hour has already flown by and we're running out of time. And before we do, I really would love to hear about any current projects and of course, how the listeners can connect with you.
Yeah, thank you. So people can, my website is avalonspirit.com.
Okay.
So at avalonspirit.com, there's different course offerings I have. Like if people want to learn to tune into their gifts and abilities, I have a Lightworker mentorship level 1 and 2. So there's that. If people want to take a deep journey with me way outside the boxes, I have a once a month evening that we do, which is called my Cosmic Consciousness Circle. And that's where we explore concepts of time, parallel realities, higher consciousness, different beings. Like it's out there. So for anyone that's searching for that out there, that's where I get to really open that up and share, fun. Which is so fun. I love it.
Sounds very fun.
And then also, I mean, if people want to connect with me daily, I have my YouTube page, Ginette Biro Medium, which I post my podcast on, which is also on the audio iTunes platforms and stuff. But I also do daily card readings on there, just tuning into, I mean, I pull cards for myself for fun anyway. So I thought, hey, let's just share this. And so I do that. And then of course, you know, Instagram and Facebook, they can find me at Ginette Biro Medium.
I'm going to get all of these links from you and I'm going to put them in the video description so people can refer to them and then reach out to you however they like. And what is the name of your book?
It's called From Avalon to Aurora.
Okay.
Medium's near-death experience. So that if people want the whole story from my fevers to the NDE and beyond, that's all in there. And it really,
what a story, man.
Yeah, it so makes more sense when you read the whole book instead of like diving into these parts, like what fevers and NDE and Pleiadians and what? And it's like, here's the book.
It's all over, but it's, there's so much. And I feel like we touched a lot in this brief time. And also what I like to do before I sign out is give my guest any last words of encouragement, wisdom. I know you shared a bit just now about the purpose. But if there's anything else and you're thinking, oh, there's one other thing I wanted to share, or just maybe some encouragement.
Oh, let me ask my guides. Hold on. Let me see if they have anything they want to say. Okay, fair. So they're saying when people are thinking like, you know, I can't do these things, or how do I raise my frequency, or how do you raise your vibes or anything? They're saying, remind people that the easiest ways to raise your own frequency and start to see the magic in the world is, I mean, obviously you could do meditation, but joy, play, and laughter are some of the best ways to have high vibes. When we're in those moments of laughter or joy or play, we are at like in our most flow state. And so if you've had a really fun, joyful evening, and after that you tune in and say hi to your guides or say like, I want to connect. Are you guys there? That's going to be one of your best states to start to make those connections. So yeah.
Ooh, okay. I haven't heard that one before. That's cool. I mean, obviously joy, love, laughter. I've been hearing this often with these interviews, but I have never heard, look, after that, go try and tap in and say hello, connect with your guides. Wow, that's awesome. Thank you for that great advice. This has been so fun.
Yeah,
I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
So I guess we're going to have to sign off. Thank you everyone for watching. Really appreciate you being here. And this has been Julie McVey with Unordinary Made Ordinary. And if you liked this, please give it a thumbs up. And if you enjoy this type of content, please subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon if you want to be alerted to future videos. And I hope you're all having a fantastic day or evening wherever you are on the planet or off the planet. And we'll see you next time. Bye.